everybody, and welcome to the Tuesday Night Music Show, where, sometimes we actually do talk about music. We are here with our superstar, producer, wingman, engineer, Howie Darkstar. He is back.
I am back.
In Jersey.
Back in Jersey, yeah.
He had a safe trip last night, and he got back really fast, too, because
I did.
I was in the chat, and all of a sudden the guy pops in. So he made good time on the road. Despite a storm, I guess you had a storm, right?
Yeah, a little bit of actually we couldn't go more than 5 miles an hour. It was I couldn't see the taillights of the car in front of me. I was actually going to stop, but yeah. But then when it cleared, 80 miles an hour all the way home. Oh, wait, I didn't say that. I didn't say that publicly.
No, I didn't hear that either. Well, some of the guys were like, oh, Howie's on the road. I'm worried. I'm like, what are you worried about? This guy's got new tires. He's got a truck he trusts. He's been through it. He's fine. Road dog. He's going to be just fine.
Oh, so
yeah. It's good to have you back and safe.
Well, thank you, sir.
And Jay is
Jay's traveling.
He's still in Boston.
I'm in Boston.
I'm
in another hotel.
Another hotel.
That's
copyright flag.
Oh, geez, here we go.
Yeah,
here we go. Have you noticed, like, Brian's background is always the same, my background's always the same, and Jay's is always the same? It's a hotel room.
Yeah, right.
I know. I got to start doing green screen of different hotel lobbies. Where are you this week? I'm in the Marriott in Shanghai.
Some one of those like abandoned properties in like the Eastern Bloc or something. That would be good. Yeah, this was a great hotel back in the 70s until war.
Yeah. There was a time.
The Turks invaded, and it's been empty for 40 years. But I'm here and having a good time.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
I don't usually give these guys a topic for the show. Just we're more fun just to throw stuff at them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they're even prepared for this. I think they can speak intelligently on it. Both of them can, even if they're not particularly prepared for it.
No,
I was going to do my own guy. But no, you're going to be fine. I was going to do my own video on this on my channel. I may still. And I actually shot it, and I said, nah, this is more of a conversation than a me just talking thing.
Okay.
I watched the Beatles Get Back on Disney Plus.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Have any of you seen the Beatles Get Back on Disney Plus?
Yes.
Just excerpts of it. I'm going to watch it, but I have not seen it. And I've heard varying opinions, so I'm interested to hear yours.
I only saw the first episode.
Okay. Well,
I'm very impressed.
It's not that there's going to be spoilers on here because we all know what happened. I mean,
right.
Right. But I just wanted to talk about some of the things that I saw on the show that I felt were pretty inspirational. Not only, as a music person, but actually as a person. And part of that is a DJ person. There's stuff in there that I think are actually valuable takeaway lessons that I think we can all learn from.
Mm-hmm.
So I will just say, first of all, before I talk about anything that I saw on the show, is that, Peter Jackson directed it. The film has been restored. And for those of you who don't know, have been, living under a rock, this is documentary footage that was shot in 1969, primarily during the recording sessions or creative sessions for the Let It Be album.
Yes.
Leading up to the rooftop concert, which is when it pretty much climaxes at the end.
Mm-hmm.
It takes place part on a soundstage, and then they eventually move it to Apple. It's good if you haven't seen it, but I will tell you that the first thing that I just found striking, like it hit me immediately. They were kids.
Oh, big time.
The early 20s.
Well,
amazing.
Nobody was 30 yet.
Right.
John and Ringo were both 28. They were the oldest.
Yes.
Paul was like, I think 25 or 24, and George was 23 years old.
Oh, he was the youngest. Wow.
23.
Yeah, Ringo's 80 now, by the way.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I think Paul's 78, 77.
yeah, I mean, this was January of that year. So if that, that twists the math a little bit, it's January of 69. So they were all kids.
Yeah, totally.
And they went to work every day. That's what they did. They were recording artists, studio recording artists. They got up and they went to work. And that's their job. That's what they did. And they'd been doing this together since they were tiny, since they were like young teenagers. They'd been together.
Didn't they start in 65 at the Cave somewhere? It was
well before that. It was well
before that.
62, I think, really.
Well, you guys are talking about are albums. They were a band before that.
Oh, they were a band like in 58, weren't they?
Something ridiculous.
Yeah, 57, 58.
That was when they had Pete Best as the drummer. They played in these little clubs and they did
that's
covers.
Before the Cavern.
Right.
Germany.
Oh, it was before the Cavern. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it was before that. So, I mean, I don't know. I've been to Liverpool, by the way. I mean, I'm not saying that to boast. I'm saying that because I've got some perspective here. I've seen their childhood homes.
Yeah, they're small.
And I've met people in Liverpool, and I've talked to people in Liverpool. I mean, just random people on the street. So I mean, I know this is many years later, but Liverpool's a very working class place. It's I don't know how to say it. It's kind of rough, you know. I mean, it's got a ruggedness about it, and the people there are a little rough. I mean, I don't know how to say it.
It's a working class town.
Well, yeah, and then some. I mean, it's very harbor city kind of stuff. And
sounds like Boston.
Maybe Boston a long time ago.
Boston's a little bit, yeah. Boston a long time ago was a working class town. Now Boston is filled with a bunch of like rich, like millennials that wear weird clothes.
I like Liverpool, by the way. I mean, I like the city, and I love the things that I saw. I did do a Beatles tour in Liverpool and saw Penny Lane and Strawberry Fields and the barbershop and their houses.
Yeah.
I saw, in fact, it was really kind of the most, I guess, standout things that I saw there. We went to this, it was several blocks that was kind of barricaded off. It was, they were going to demolish it to build low-income housing. They were row houses from the early 20th century. They were very tiny. There was no one on the street. It was so peaceful. And that's where Ringo was born. It was just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And I got to see it like 3 weeks before they knocked it over. I got pictures of it. It's real cool. I was there with Mikey Mike and Chris Bedke and Brian Dowdle. It was really neat. But
by the way, check out the James Corden, the carpool karaoke. With
I've
Paul
seen
McCartney.
that.
Yes.
Yeah, I've seen
that.
that.
And they go to his house, and he's in the room with the piano going, yeah, this is the piano.
Yeah.
And my dad would sit there, and John and I would sit here, and we did a song, and we're like, she loves you, yeah, yeah, yeah. And he's like, boys, no, she loves you, yes. And we're like, that doesn't sound as good. She loves you, yes, yes, yes. Now we'll do the yeah.
We're going to do the yeah, Dad.
Yeah, actually, that was the longest carpool karaoke he's ever done because he did a whole hour with Paul.
It was worth it.
Paul's got something to say.
Well, yeah.
And I want to talk about Paul, but first, I think I should save him for a little later. First, I think I should probably talk about Ringo.
Peace and love. Peace and love. Peace and love.
That's the perception of Ringo. This is what I saw in the doc, and I'm sure Howie saw the same thing.
Yeah.
Ringo was the first one there.
Yep.
Every day.
Every day.
And no attitude. He sat behind that drum kit and waited for somebody to come up with something, and he put a beat behind it. That's what Ringo did. He was always paying attention, and everyone loved Ringo. I mean, you could hear people talking about him. You know, how cool Ringo was, and how I just love Ringo. He's so great. And he was. You know what his real name is?
I was just trying to think of it, and I knew you were going to mention it, and I'm like, God, what is it?
Well, the reason I'm mentioning it, because this was the one standout of the whole show.
Richard Starkey?
Yeah. I think
Richard Starkey is his name.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, right. What do I win?
Oh, well, here was the part that blew my mind.
Pizza.
It might have been the second or third day. I think Paul was actually there first, and then Ringo came in, and Paul looks up and he says, "Oh, hey, Rich." It was like, what? Really? He called him Rich.
Wow.
I mean, whatever. But as a person who's just known who they were our whole lives, they just call him, "Hey, Rich, what's up?" "Hey, Paul." And it was just the most nonchalant thing in the world. But I thought that was, I don't know, it was surreal in a way. It was kind of neat to see and hear. I mean, just very candidly.
Well, in that relationship, they're not the Beatles. They're just four guys writing songs.
These guys were family.
Yeah, therefore, I mean, you're going to give a different perspective, but the one endearing thing I've heard from everyone that has seen it is they've all synonymously said they don't blame Yoko Ono.
No, they don't.
I'll get to that.
Okay.
I won't, because I've thought about this. And
are we jumping ahead?
No, we were fine. But I do want to talk about the Yoko thing.
Right.
I just want to talk about the boys first. So next, I guess we'll talk about Paul. And Paul, I don't know how else to say it. Man's a machine.
Yeah, he's prolific.
He was like 24, 25 years old. And the situation was this, Jay. This was their process. Okay.
Yeah.
It was the beginning of January, and like the third or fourth week of January, they were supposed to have an album done. They hadn't done anything. So what they would do is they would go to the studio and write the album, record the album, and then they were done. Then it was over. And then they'd start over, and they did it again with Abbey Road after that, but we didn't see that.
Right.
That's how they did it. Like they did several a year like this. This wasn't just like we're going to take a year and write our next album. No, let's go to the studio and work it out. So there's pressure there, right? So Paul is just sitting there like, I don't know, trying to come up with something. And you watch him come up with Get Back.
Yeah.
Like just noodling comes up with it. You watch him come up with, Let It Be. You watch him come up with, what was the other one he did that was just like, whoa, Long and Winding Road. Just like off the hat, he's coming up with this stuff. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, everyone has pointed to that. And the other funny characteristic is I hear this a lot. They started yelling at the TV because there are times, I haven't seen it, but there are times where Paul doesn't have lyrics yet.
Right.
Or he's singing a lyric that's not the final lyric. And you're watching him going, no, you're supposed to say, get back, get back, get back to where you once belong. Instead of like, like, you
mean we're yelling at the TV because
the viewers yelling at TV going like, what do you know? You're going to say this because we already know the future.
Right. We're almost there. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I've heard that they have a term. It's like they're using place fillers until they figure it out, and they'll just either hum or say it. Yeah. It's a place filler till we figure it out. Yeah.
Oh, they do this humming. Like every artist does this. They don't have the lyrics yet. So they're like, okay, the song's going to go like, on my own. But the rest is like, on. Like they'll have a line and they'll just fill in gaps just to get the melodies out.
Yeah.
But with the Beatles, it's like, these are prolific historical pieces.
They all did it a little different though. That was so interesting because John, John and Paul, first of all, they almost had like a secret twin language because they knew they didn't talk about things much. They would just do things that they anticipated the other person wanted and would come up with stuff. It was really neat to watch. John seemed like he came in a little more prepared with a foundation of a song ready to go. And he would start playing it, and then everybody else would just kind of fall in and fill in the blanks. Right. So it was a little different. Paul was doing it on the fly, where I think John came in with something. He didn't it just didn't come out in the studio. That just wasn't his process. George was different. Oh, and I will say this about John too. Hilarious. John Lennon by far was the comedian. He was so funny. And you wouldn't expect that.
No,
John is the funny one. They were all funny, but John was really the funny one. And Paul's funny too, but it was usually because George was egging him on to do it. It was interesting. Paul just didn't goof off on his own. If George instigated him, he would goof off.
Well, they have such a famous relationship, and the fights and the this and that. And Paul McCartney recently told the story real quick of, getting in an argument with John and John flipping out and kind of yelling at Paul and Paul yelling at John and John going like this. It's just me. Like lowering his glasses and saying to Paul McCartney, it's just me, John. And putting his glasses back and then going back to the argument as if to say, like, this is who I am. This is what I'm going to do. If
when you see the doc, you'll get it.
Yeah.
It's really neat.
Yeah.
George, he had, first of all, 23 years old. Right. He'd been a superstar for what? 7 years already? Maybe?
At least, yeah.
And he's 23 years old. It's crazy. And
wow.
But and all of these guys are stupid creative and just so prolific. George didn't create the same way Paul did or John did or even Ringo did. More probably similar to Ringo, I guess. George wasn't the guy to sit in the studio and come up with something. George was the guy who would have nothing one day, nothing the next day, nothing the next day. And then one day he would just come in the morning and say, got something. And he'd had to get it out right away. And it would be a bar or a line or something. And then everybody would kind of like, okay, how about this? And then they work it out that way collectively.
Yeah.
So it was always a different creative process. And now that I've mentioned all of them, you talked about fights. You didn't see a fight in this thing.
No, that's what I keep hearing. That's
you
the
didn't
thing
see
about
a fight.
Right. That's what I keep hearing, that they got along really, really well.
Like
really expose those myths and stories that we've heard all these years.
So mature.
That they were false.
So mature.
For young 20-somethings.
Yeah.
George got annoyed. And I know why he got annoyed.
Well, he left at one point. During the recording, he left.
He did.
He did. And here's why he left. It took me
I know this
to kind of work it out. So Paul's working out Get Back. All right. And he's got this, it's in his head. I mean, he could play it on the piano. I didn't hear him, but he could every note. He could hear it. And George is jumping in with what he thinks might be cool. And Paul's like, don't do it like that. Do it like this. Try it like this. And George is like, oh, okay, fine. I'll play what you want me to play. And he would play it. So that's pretty much what it was. And that's it. That was why he was upset. And it sounds stupid, but if you think about it, you've got this guy who's coming up with these great songs. He's young. He's not upset. He's not pissed. He's not yelling at anybody. But he's like, how come Paul's treating me like a session musician right now?
Right.
I usually jump in and add my own thing. Paul already had this concept. So you can't get really mad at Paul because Paul had a vision. And you can't get mad at John because John's like, dude, I'm not a hired hand here. I'm a Beatle.
Right.
But they didn't yell about it. It was literally like this. Okay, well, I'm not coming in tomorrow. I guess this is my last day. And they thought he was probably joking around and dismissed it and he walked away. That's as bad as it got. That's all it was. And he came back. They talked out and he came back.
Yeah.
He was also very uncomfortable with what they were trying to do. They were going to initially do some television special thing with an audience, and George wasn't into it. So he was uncomfortable with the situation. He was uncomfortable with the studio they were in. He didn't like the surroundings. And then Paul's treating him like a session guy. So he got annoyed. And at 23 years old, he didn't lose his shit. He just said, you know what? I got to walk away from this. So he did. But nobody yelled and screamed at each other. Everybody was kind to each other. Another scene that just stuck with me was, all these songs that they're coming up with off of the Let It Be album that, would come to pass. And they asked Ringo early on, what do you got? He's like, I really don't have anything. Everything I have is kind of slow and I don't really have anything. But he's there to support. They're all there to support each other. So Ringo just was sitting there one day. He's like, I don't know. I'd like to be under the sea in an octopus's garden. And instead of everybody looking at it, I'm like, are you high? No, get out of here with that. They're like, what if we did it like this? They were all just like ready to help each other and ready to be there for each other, no matter what the idea was. They weren't saying it's a bad idea. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't do that. They were just, let's try this. Yeah. And they went with it. That was so cool. And again, I got to go back to what I said initially. These were kids doing this.
Yeah.
I don't know adults who can do this. Like grown, established, mature people who can be this cool and have this kind of demeanor with any individual, let alone a group of individuals. It was just fascinating to watch.
Yeah. I've heard people say that they would like to see this done on other groups in the writing process and just see, because you get to see what comes from, what do you think of this, to here's a song that you've loved for the last 40, 50 years. Like, and I think when you take the curtain down, sometimes it's awe-inspiring and other times it's not. Other times it's like, oh yeah, I was sitting around one day and I had this note in my head and 10 minutes later I wrote, girl, you really got me. Like, there isn't always a great, we want our songs we love, we want a big romantic story behind it. Like, there was a storm and you saw a horse run across the field and you wrote this. It's like, no, actually I was in the bathroom and I was shaving and I wrote it. Oh, well, that's not cool.
I really don't think that there are many other bands out there that you could document like this.
The only one that stands out is Metallica. Process. Metallica did that big, the Monster video, which was a documentary on their process of writing Saint Anger. But, you know, that delves more into the fact that the band was so toxic with each other and all their issues and problems.
This was the opposite.
That's what I'm hearing. Is that, no, this is like, hey, here's some like 4 cool guys. And by the way, when you say about talent with George, All Things Will Pass, that came out like 4 years after this. So his best solo project, I think, was his first album. And between what you see on this show and that, he still writes While My Guitar Gently Weeps and brings in Eric Clapton.
You hear him, you hear the beginnings of him just noodling around with something.
Yeah.
In this doc.
Yeah.
Like, they don't take it very, he's like, how about this? I don't know. They didn't go much further than that. And it was just fascinating though. The thing I will say about the argument and just the composure and the demeanor that these gentlemen had, and versus the hype. And we see a lot of hype today. We just do. It's part of our lives now. It's in politics, it's in music, it's in entertainment, it's everywhere, especially with social media. So that was pretty much the conversation. Look, I got to get out of here. There was no yelling and screaming or anything left. So they're reading in the paper a couple days later how they're sitting there all together reading this, how John and George had a fist fight. And they're laughing like, what is this? I mean, we clearly saw there was no fist fight.
Right.
But the papers were reporting that it was this thing.
Right.
And then there's some journalist writing some smack about the Beatles and how they're not the same and they're self-destructive and all this. Paul is reading this article in a funny voice, and the other guys are like playing music to it in the background, like they made a song out of it. It's really funny. It's very funny. It's like an editorial on who they are, and they're has-beens. The Beatles are has-beens, and you hear them just jamming in the background. Ringo, it was very funny. I want to now. You know, we can address the Yoko in the room if you'd like.
Yoko.
I haven't seen it, so I'm interested to see this because it's been the big thing I've heard from everyone. It's like,
she was actually.
Oh, and by the way, Yoko didn't break them up. I'm like, what do you mean?
No,
nothing broke them up. They weren't even fighting. They got along perfectly well.
No,
they just, you know.
Well, about Yoko, everyone was cool with Yoko.
Yeah,
everyone. In fact, they even let her get on the mic and would jam and let her make noises like, which is all she was doing.
That's what she does.
But they were like, hey, yeah, cool. And they weren't like joking around or goofing on her or anything. Everybody was totally respectful of Yoko. So,
do you think someone said this, and it's an interesting perspective, because John Lennon had such a tough life, especially with women in his lives, with his mother dying and just being kind of alone. Do you think that he latched on to Yoko and she was everywhere he was as some sort of a safety blanket, like a security thing? Because I've heard that a couple times too. Like, you can see that she's almost a mother to him as much as a girlfriend. Because everywhere she is, he is, and vice versa. Like, they're almost symbiotic.
I didn't pick up on the mothering part. But I didn't even pick up
close.
I didn't even pick up on John being hyper attentive to her, because he was there to do things.
Right.
She was
I think, but
physically touching him next to him while he's doing it.
Yes.
And she's never more than a few feet away from him.
That's the point they were trying to make, was that she's so close to him,
but
it might be to make up for the losses that he had in his life when he was younger.
But he wasn't necessarily hyper focused on her. Yeah, there were times when they would dance around and talk or whatever, but most of the time he was working, and him and Paul were having conversations and joking around and writing together. Right. You know, John's finishing Paul's songs because that's what he did. So no, I don't think Yoko went in there and tried to cause friction. What I think happened, and it's one of those things you got to read between the lines. Paul talks about this because they're interviewing him, just casually interviewing him, and it's mentioned twice, and it's almost the same responses every time. And Paul is cool about it. He's not resentful about it or anything else. But they said, "You and John don't write together much anymore, do you?" He says, "No." So I usually just, I'm doing it. Well, why not? He said, "Well, we just kind of lived together. We were on tour. We were sharing the same hotel rooms. We were together. We were a couple, and that's what we did. We wrote and we bounced ideas off of each other. But, for the last 2 years, he's been with Yoko all the time, and it's just not the same." So I think that was it. And when I really think about it, and maybe I'm way off here, but I'm looking at the Beatles as a process. And this was the process that we didn't see before Yoko came along. John and Paul would write this stuff down. They would come into the studio and say, "Okay, here's something more than a foundation. Here's something a little more complete. Ringo, put a beat behind it. George, would you like to put a riff behind it? Here's a song." Where now it's like, "Okay, Paul, I'm under pressure to write. I got to write. I don't have John to do this anymore with me. If John doesn't happen to be here in the morning because he slept in, which is not a big deal. He eventually did come in. I got to get this stuff knocked out. We don't have the time we used to." So when that went away, the Beatles weren't the same because the process was different. It was just their process. Those guys had been attached at the hip since they were like 17, 18 years old.
But I don't find this unusual in any different than, like, okay, you had high school friends. All right. And, oh man, you guys are really close. You did everything together. Then your friend gets a girlfriend and he starts to have a life where they get married, and the friendships just naturally drift apart. And I think it was a natural process. I don't think that they broke up per se, that as much as they did as much as they could with their art, and then they went their own ways. George wanted to do his own solo project.
Yeah, he did. He mentioned
while he was still a Beatle.
Yep.
Right. And then Paul, well, we know what happened with him. With the Wings, great success. So just a natural progression to me. It's just a natural progression of life, really.
And I guess that's how I'm looking at it. I didn't look at it as a breakup. I looked at it as an evolution.
Yeah.
And I always kind of have, because I've made no secret that I enjoy the music that they do as individuals more so than I do what they did as a group. I prefer that. Given all of them have something to bring to the table, because I would sense this power struggle in Beatles songs where nobody was really shining like they should, because they all had to have a piece of it. Where with Paul McCartney or with John Lennon or Harrison or even Ringo, you could hear them You know, this is what they sound like. Yes, of course. Of course, this is a Paul McCartney song. And then you go back to Beatles and you hear Beatles songs like, okay, that's a Paul song. That's a John song. Okay, that's George. That's Ringo. You can pick it apart better. It was almost like a super group. Like it should have been the other way around. Like they should have been solo artists. I mean, obviously they had to grow together as a family and as a band, but it was almost like a super group. Opposed to,
yeah. But I got to say this. My favorite part that I identified with was when they were struggling. Where should we do this? Or should we do theater? And then off the cuff, Paul says, "Why not on the roof?" And I thought, you know, that's something I would have said when I was in my 20s. Like when I said, why don't I skydive into my concert? That would be cool. They brought
the idea to him.
Right.
And they like I forget the names. There was Gwen and somebody else. It might have been who was their producer at the time? What's wrong with
George Martin?
George Martin came to him and you could see the footage of them telling him this. You can't hear what they're saying because I think John and George are jamming in the background with Ringo, but they're talking to him and Paul's like, you know, it's like you could. And he's like, "Oh yeah, this says." So then Paul presents it to the group. Yeah.
Then it makes it a whole art performance. It's like a great song. They're doing it on the roof, and now it's like, and then the police get caught. Look, as soon as the cops are called, there's going to be stories and legends, and that's exactly what happened.
Well, George was not down with any of this. Like he just wasn't like, I don't want to do this. And then like, well, you know, I think we should. I don't want to do it though. Well, yeah, but I think we should. Once he was up there, he was nothing but smiles. Like he liked it.
I find that odd. He was the youngest, but he was thinking older than the other guys. Like, oh, we shouldn't be on the roof, you know.
Well, you know how it is. I mean, Jay, you know how it is. There are certain friends that you have that you know so well that you'll like. I can say to you, you're gonna love this song, Jay. They're like, I don't know. I don't know if I want to listen to this song by some band I hate. It's like, no. I think you'll like this one. Just give it a try. It's like they knew George better than George knew himself. The group knew him that well. It's like, I know you don't want to do this, but we're not even worried about it because once you do it, you're going to love it. And he did.
Yeah.
And you can see in his face, he was all smiles. Well, if he was like in dread or uncomfortable, he wouldn't be smiling like that. He had no reason to smile like that.
They're really an anomaly because when they first met, they're so young and in such a sheltered place. But they had to grow up in the world together. So that dynamic is different.
Yeah.
Most bands have their whole lives to write the first album and then 6 months to write the second. They never stopped writing great albums. It isn't like people,
they didn't.
Nobody says, oh, the Beatles are really good except for these 4 albums. I mean,
there wasn't a bad album.
Yeah.
No, there isn't a bad album. Like everything is really, really good. So they were just a machine that just kept putting out.
Yeah.
And it came down to that chemistry. I mean, I didn't know this till the other day when I heard Paul McCartney in an interview. Do you know that he played every part on the first Wings album?
Yes.
Just every instrument.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah, no, it was like he pulled like a Prince on Purple Rain thing.
Or Stevie Wonder or Lenny Kravitz. Yeah.
He did everything
Todd
on
Rundgren or Trent Reznor. Yeah.
He did all the instrumentation.
Interestingly enough, any one of those boys could have jumped on any of those instruments and played, and they did.
And yes,
you saw true. Everybody was behind that drum kit.
Oh yeah.
Everybody picked up a bass. Everybody picked up a guitar. Everybody sat at the piano at one time or another. Yeah. They could all play each other's instruments and well.
Yeah, that's
it was neat.
Weird thing. There's an album that Paul McCartney plays drums on. There's a song by another artist, and it's either Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, or something. And they called him up and like, "Hey man, we got this song. Would you be interested in playing on it?" He's like, "Sure, I'll do drums." And they're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, I got this beat in my head. I think it would really work." So Paul McCartney's credited as playing drums on a song on somebody else's album that he's also singing on. But he was like, "No, cool. I'll do the drums."
Yeah. He could. He could play anything.
There was no
Well, they're
sense
artists.
of you can't.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. There was no sense of, we have to find out. And they didn't have, and you know the beauty of it, and I'm glad it happened when it did, because if it happened today with all the digital technology, they'd be in the studio for 45 years trying to make one song.
These were not
technology
jaded dudes.
Would mess it up.
I mean, these were not jaded dudes.
No,
these were
they
grounded.
Were like, here you go. Here's
cool,
the chords. Do
nice
this
guys.
And go.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted to be there, and they got along, and they were happy, and they screwed off constantly.
I heard they smoked a ton.
But
everybody smoked a ton back then.
But no, I know, but it's
to
like
screw off that much. They were putting out a new album every 6 months. Not like, we're taking off 2 years. We'll be back with another album. No. They were just, like you said earlier, a machine. My just God, machines.
They go in. They would just bust butt for weeks.
I can remember, seriously, there's an new Beatle album coming out. People were waiting outside on the sidewalk, waiting for the music store to open up because they wanted to get that album. Not a single. They wanted the whole album.
Which probably had 7 songs, 8 songs, was maybe 35 minutes long.
The whole album.
Really good 7 or 8 songs, though.
But I'm saying, like, you look at today with like 15, 16 tracks, it's an hour and 10 minutes long. And it's all fluff. And these guys are putting out 7 or 8 masterpieces on one piece of vinyl. And then they wait 6 months and here comes... Well, everyone did that to a certain extent. Elton John's first few albums, same thing. Album tour. Every year albums came out. Religiously.
I mean, we were also saying how they had mentioned that in the early days, or in the first part of their career, I guess I should say, they toured constantly.
Yes.
And once they stopped doing that, they had a lot more time to write and concentrate. So, I mean, you come up with things when you're on the road, and they obviously did, but when they were able to sit down in a studio together or sit at home and write together and just not worried about this constant touring thing, they got a lot more done.
Their last live show in front of an audience, not counting this one, was years before, I think, wasn't it?
It had been 3 years. Been 3 years.
Yeah, it was like...
It'd been 3 years, and they hadn't played live.
Right.
And they were still putting out product.
Yeah.
And you think of, outside of their beginning, when you think of their actual album process, they were together for 7 years. They were released products for 7 years and then broke up.
Yeah,
but that was a different time. That was a different time when you actually would make a fortune selling your albums, your music, not getting the Spotify pennies. Now these poor artists have to tour. That's where they make their money, and the merch.
No, 100%.
Yeah, the tour was to support the album. Now,
well, I mean, look at the early days. How many albums did Steely Dan put out before they toured?
Right.
I don't know.
They weren't even a band. I would guess they put out 5 or 6 albums.
I Can't Buy a Thrill was the first album.
Yeah. But I don't think they toured well until late in the 70s.
I remember that they brought on, I don't remember his name, but they brought in a guy, a second singer, because Donald Fagen didn't want to sing on tour. So they brought this guy in for the Can't Buy a Thrill album. Story. And he's the guy who's singing on Dirty Work.
Yes.
I don't remember his name. And he didn't make the second album, but his purpose was to be the touring singer.
Yeah.
Because Donald Fagen didn't want to do it.
Well, they couldn't figure out the touring band because they would have entire bands come in on Monday and then a different band on Tuesday and then the same Monday band on Wednesday. Like it was a revolving band door. I mean, it
was an all-star band.
You would have like 12 guitar players from Larry Carlton and Jeff Skunk Baxter and Rick Derringer and Jay Groden, like all these players down the road would all be on one album. Like, how are you going to tour that?
I have a spoiler alert for you here about this that you probably know about. You probably know, but it was cool because they're coming up with all of these tracks, right?
Yep.
And sometimes Paul feels obligated to be on the piano, but he really wants to be on the bass. And he keeps saying, we got to bring somebody in to be on keys.
I know who came in.
And out of nowhere, Billy Preston just pops in to say hi and like, hey, do you want to sit in? We need a guy.
Yeah.
So Billy Preston starts jamming, and he's the one who's coming up with all those little riffs and stuff and Let It Be. And John says like several times, he needs to just join the band. He needs to be the fifth Beatle. We need to just bring him in. Like, he's not even kidding. He's like, we need him for he needs to be the fifth Beatle.
Yeah.
He's a new Beatle.
I think the Stones had the same feeling about him because he did even more work with the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, he played with a lot of bands. He was the go-to pianist.
He was in town. I want to say he was in town to support something weird like Living Unfaithful or something like that. It was or Lulu. That's what it was. Lulu. There was some Lulu special on TV, and he was there for that. But yeah,
they up to Sir with Love a little bit.
They just grabbed him, and they didn't discuss money or anything. They just gave him a freaking electric piano and said, go. And he did. And there was an organ there, and he sit down and play that. And oh man, it was cool. And he was just like, he reminded me of Ringo.
Yeah.
Where he was just ready to go.
Yeah.
Oh, you got a tune? Okay, I'll put something behind it. And he knew right when to come in. Like, he wasn't, trying to showboat, but he knew where he could add to it, and he did, and it was good, and everyone agreed it was good, and it was just so neat to watch. It was so much fun. So I don't know, just
I'll have to look it up, but he wrote something super famous for somebody else, and I can't for the life of me think of what it is, but he wrote a famous track, not for Stevie Wonder, but for somebody. Billy Preston is the writer of a song that we all know, almost like, Stand By Me. It's not Stand By Me, but it's some huge song that I didn't know until someone said, oh, Billy Preston wrote that. I'm like, he did?
He was on the rooftop with them too.
Yeah. He played up there.
He was.
Yeah.
No, he's super talented guy. And
but
then
it was just neat to see.
5 years later, he's playing Bangladesh with George Harrison.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like, oh, here's Billy Preston.
I highly recommend that, Jay,
I really want to watch it.
I don't know if you have Disney
I'm
Plus.
going to.
But
I'll get it just for this. Yeah.
Get it just for that and then cancel if you have to. You'll love it.
$2. I'm really looking forward to it because I want to see the process.
Well,
because that's what always blows my mind is how they come up from, how did you get from A to B? And you find out it was never a direct. It's always.
Here we are. We're all more than twice their ages. I mean, it's just incredible. And they just, their discipline, their demeanor, their canter, their just the tone they use in their voices, the funny banter back and forth. It's hilarious. They spend most of the time screwing off. Maybe
it's
half.
Kind of like us. We spend most of the time screwing off.
It's worse. It's
like
oh
the
my
Beatles
God.
now. I never thought the day would come that I would come out of my mouth saying, "Oh, so we're like the Beatles."
No, not like I didn't mean it like that. But when he said screwing off all the time, that's us.
They would sing like their songs in funny voices. Like they do a whole song and they would just start playing it. All of a sudden, Paul would just start singing it in a silly voice. There was a Lennon song on that album. I don't remember which one it was, but him and John sang it together, and they all sang it with their teeth clenched like this in a funny voice. It was hilarious. They did the whole song like that.
It's kind of like. Are you talking about like Jay when he does his impressions and grabs his mic and holds it close to his face?
There you go.
They weren't doing it for anybody but themselves, though. There was nobody there.
Right.
The engineers and producers were in the other room. They were trying to do their thing. There wasn't even tape rolling, and these guys are just doing this stuff.
I can understand that, though. You're stuck. They're actually working. They know they're working, and okay, hey. We got to let off a little steam, and they let it off through music.
I think that was part of it.
And
I think the other part was just a warm up,
and that could be too,
because they would bust into these like 50s songs and other people's songs, just like boom, or even contemporary stuff at the time. Stuff they liked or they were checking out, and Be like, well, let's play this song for a minute. Well, there's no reason for it. They just, okay. But no one said, nah, I don't want to do that right now. But I was like, yeah, sure. And they would all do it. It was weird.
Yeah.
It was like, I don't know. It was like watching almost like some religious group move together. It was not normal. You know, it was almost cult-like. It was just goofy. Like they were hive minds sometimes, but it was, highly recommended, dude. You're going to love it.
Can you imagine the pressure on them at that age, though, with the world looking at them?
Yeah, but
they didn't seem to care.
I know, but that's
they didn't seem
bother
like
them,
it was
huh?
pressure.
Yeah, no, I know.
That's
That's what's kind of shocking.
They
Yeah,
were just having fun.
Oh, they're saying this about us. Oh well, so be it.
right.
Yeah.
It's like whatever. They didn't get mad.
Yeah,
Right.
that's totally.
They didn't get angry. Nobody got angry.
Did you feel like they were under pressure? I didn't. That wasn't my impression.
Well, they put themselves in the position. No one told them to do that.
Right.
They made the choice to do that, or somebody, probably John and Paul made the choice to do that. And Ringo's like, okay, fine. And George's like, I don't know, man. They're like, you'll be fine. Come on. And then he was.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just speculating, but
You have to have a dynamic.
I think they needed to have some sense of urgency to do something. So they do that to themselves, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes when you have a deadline, it motivates you to actually finish a project of whatever
get it worked out. Get it worked
Right.
out.
Kind of like you with like, hey, I want to get this done by wintertime on the Mustang, and you do it because the cold is coming.
Yeah.
You know, you had your deadline.
It really makes you feel like you're not doing enough with your life watching these guys do it.
Yeah, that's so true,
God.
though. It's like
I'm a loser.
Yeah,
I
this
just
is not
suck.
This is not going to help with the self-esteem department.
No, not at all.
What
But
did you
the
do
crazy
today? I
part
wrote
about
Get
it is,
Back. What did you do?
the crazy part
Painted
about it is, those guys would be like, no, you're fine, man. You're doing your thing. You're good. They'd honestly say that, and they'd mean it because they were that cool. They would be like, I wrote Get Back, and what did you do today? They're not those guys. They were just so chill about everything. I don't know, man. One of the most impressive things I've seen in a long time. And I know some people are looking at it and saying, it's 6 hours of that. I'm like, you weren't paying attention.
By the way,
you obviously, and I'm not even a Beatles fan.
Right.
I mean, you know that. I've said that. I mean, I like them, but I'm not like that guy.
No, you're not that guy.
No, you're a Paul fan, but not a Beatles.
Well, I like them all individually.
Yeah, you don't like them collectively.
Well,
as much.
They're okay collectively. I prefer them individually.
Right.
And that's something that I just really got to be careful, and I really got to make sure that.
So you're the guy that like where the corn and the mashed potatoes and the meat can't touch each other on the plate, right?
That's my brother.
Still got the triangle.
That is for real, my brother.
He's
my
got
brother
the
is totally
separators
like
on
that.
the plate, like 5-year-olds have, where like everything is broken up.
No, it's just because I prefer them as solo artists doesn't mean I dislike them as a band.
No,
it just means I prefer them as solo artists.
Now, question real quick: would you watch more of this?
Probably,
because Peter Jackson is supposed to release. He didn't release all of it. There's supposedly like a 16-hour director's cut.
He said that there was, I think, 60 hours of footage and 150 hours of audio.
Right. That's what I heard.
Something like that. And there's a 16-hour director's cut. Because the only thing I've heard that was negative was he left too much in. That some people feel he could have edited it down even more. I'm like, I haven't seen it, so they're like, some of it's boring, but it's only boring if you don't like the Beatles or you don't want to see the process.
I don't know. How can I say this? I don't know what words I'm looking for. I was there for the ride with them, like when they were working the songs out. I'm hanging there, like I'm a member of the band, and I'm listening, and I'm hearing little things. Okay, you're almost there.
Yeah.
So it was almost an interactive experience for me. But
that's a great way to put it.
If you're not a music person, if that's not, I mean, it's okay. I mean, I'm just going to say it. It's okay if you're a DJ and you're not a music person, because not everybody who's a DJ is a music person. Not everybody who's a music person is a DJ.
If you're not, you need to get out of this room.
You know what? I'm not.
Somebody last night said that. Not you, Brian. Someone.
No, I heard about that.
Yeah,
no, but it's how can I say this? I don't know, man. I was there and watching the creative process, and it was so impressive to me. I probably would watch a longer version of it. It was.
See, I would like to see a painter paint something.
There's a lot of people. Yeah.
I would love to see like the story behind Starry Nights and see if they found footage, which obviously, you know, I'm making this up because they don't have it. But, you know, if they had footage of Van Gogh, where he started, where he was standing when I mean, to me, that stuff's always very interesting. Like what got you going?
What was the creative process?
The other night I played Melissa by the Allman Brothers, and somebody made a comment. I love this song. I'm like, yeah, it comes from Greg Allman being in a grocery store and a mother with a Southern accent going, Melissa, little sweet Melissa, come here. And that's all he had to hear was Sweet Melissa. And he went home and wrote it. Took him like 5 minutes. Boom, here you go, Sweet Melissa.
And you know what? There's probably a lot of stuff like that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff like that probably, I mean, you could document it, but it wouldn't like, okay, what are we watching here? I believe that this was unique.
Oh,
like,
I
this
agree.
is truly unique. I don't think you could have pulled this off with many other bands. You couldn't have done it with a lot of people.
Stones, maybe.
No, not even the Stones. And we were talking about this. John C and I were talking about this last night. If you look at, and you were here too for it, were you, Howie? Or were you not here yet?
I think, what time did I got in at 4?
My time, it was like 3:30, so like 4:30 your time, a little after.
Yeah, okay.
A little after 4 your time.
Yeah.
But we were talking about the Stones, and it somehow came up where Paul had said on social media that the Stones were a blues cover band, and how that was
right.
Really,
and that's true.
But it's true.
That was their first album, was all covers.
Yeah, and I think it was Paul who said, "Hey, you guys should try to write some of your own stuff because we like you." They liked them well enough to put them on the cover of Sgt. Pepper. I mean, they did like the guys.
Oh no, they didn't have a battle with each other.
But they were. I think John C. And it was interesting because I never thought of this. John C. looked up like every Rolling Stones hit that was a cover, and it was a huge list.
Oh, it's massive.
Like I was like, I thought that was theirs. Like I didn't realize that they'd covered that. And then something. Oh, of course, that's a cover.
Yeah,
you know. But there weren't many songs they wrote. They mostly covered songs.
Dude, Black Crowes, their biggest hit was Hard to Handle.
Yeah.
Guess what? It's a cover.
Oh.
Like it's, if you look deep enough, all you got to do is go back to old blues, which is the DNA of the Stones, and like everything is a cover.
John just chimed in and said surprisingly long list because he's here. Yes, absolutely surprisingly long list. It was fascinating. I never thought of it like that.
Yeah. You know, that could be a whole nother show. Is like,
well, and the Beatles did a few covers.
It had
sure.
Yeah, they didn't do a lot, but they did a few.
Well, you wouldn't have known it in the studio because all they did were just bust out and cover songs just to warm up. Like they were constantly doing it and goofing on them. And it was, you got to see it. Yeah. Now, if you're into Michael Bay films, you know, maybe this isn't for you because there's not a lot of action,
not a lot of
not a lot of drama.
No Camaros.
There's no like big thing that happens at the end, in the middle. It's a documentary film for music.
You already know how it ends. It's rare that you see something where you're like, I know how this ends.
Yeah, and just because you know how it ends doesn't mean it's Titanic. Okay, this is still a documentary.
Yeah.
Right.
So just be forewarned before you. I watched it and it wasn't any fun. I didn't see the action.
I thought
it's not the Kardashians either. No, it's legit behind the scenes footage of something.
Yeah.
They weren't playing to the camera at all. It was good. But anyway.
It's not Spinal Tap.
Anyway, it was I just wanted to do a show on it just to see how it would go.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it. Absolutely, for sure. I'm gonna watch it.
I apologize to both of you gentlemen for doing most of the talking tonight, but I really had some thoughts to get off my chest.
No, it was great. Very interesting.
We'll revisit it when we've all seen the whole thing.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I would too. Yeah.
At least touch on it, you know?
No, I mean, it came out. I was in Vegas, the next week, Phoenix, home for a week, which was Thanksgiving. And then I'm here in Boston. So it's like I've been sort of running around. It's like,
oh, so
now that I'm going to be back.
You're not name dropping, you're city dropping now.
City dropping, yeah. Scottsdale, Las Vegas,
on the road again.
Revere, Massachusetts, near Everett.
I've been everywhere, man.
Side note, I didn't take a photo, but there's an Encore casino here in Everett. And literally the skyline from here to Boston, pretty much just has a huge windmill like fan, and then the encore. And you look at it like, fuck's that doing there? Like, and there's nothing really around it that's big. It's just sitting there in the middle of nothing. And I'm like, are they going to build more? No, just one.
Jay, I have your theme song, Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere, man.
I've been everywhere, man. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great track. That's a great track.
It's a rap song too.
Oh, big time. Oh, it's a huge rap song. You kidding? The original gangster rapper right there. No Johnny Cash, no Punk.
That's true.
No Johnny Cash, no Howie Dark Star outfits.
You know, I could take you guys down the other rabbit hole that John C. and I went down last night, which was interestingly enough, I thought it was interesting, and I think the room thought it was interesting too, was Howard Jones. But we'll talk about that off camera. We'll talk about him off camera a little bit.
All right.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for watching, guys. I'm sorry we actually gave you a music show tonight.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about.
I'll be back in Cali next week. Maybe it won't be about music.
Yeah, you and LL Cool J. I don't think so. All right, guys. Take care. We'll see you next week.